Hey there movie fans, I'm John Andersen and I continue my series on the Alien franchise leading up to the release of Alien Covenant later this month. We already took a look at Alien and Aliens, which if you haven't seen my reviews of those films, be sure to click the card above for a link to the playlist. And as I stated before, the other films in the Alien franchise are really not good movies, so with that out of the way, let's take a look at this Alien prequel. Prometheus was a very divisive film when it was released in 2012, with some calling it a masterpiece that most people didn't get, or a confusing film with ample questions left unanswered. For me personally, I fell kind of somewhere in the middle, where it never left a lasting impression on me, as I only watched it once when it was released, and only watching it again for this review and for its follow-up. The crew of the ship Prometheus traveled to LV-223 in search of humanity's creators known as the Engineers, but what they thought was an invitation turns out to be a path to death and destruction. The first thing that became apparent to me was how much more futuristic Prometheus looked when compared to Alien, which is definitely a trait we see in most prequel films, especially when you look at the Lord of the Rings trilogy and the Hobbit trilogy, where Orlando Bloom's Legolas looks older in the prequel than in the original. Obviously, these lapses in continuity are due to the limitations of the time, but this fact does still slightly take me out of prequel films in general, even though I did like the fact that in the case of Prometheus, the stunning visuals were very appealing. Then we meet Michael Fassbender's David, who gives Ian Holmes' Ash a run for his money when it comes to compelling android characters. Ash definitely gave off a more sinister vibe, where David comes off more curious than evil, making a character with no emotions one of the more compelling aspects of this film. As for the rest of the cast, they're pretty paint by numbers, with the exceptions being Charlize Theron's Vickers, who is played very ambiguously, as she could be a human or an android, similarly to what we saw in another Ridley Scott film, Blade Runner.
They're just questions, Leon. In answer to your query, they're written down for me. It's a test designed to provoke an emotional response. Shall we continue?
But in my opinion, the film plays this aspect a little too ambiguously, as the fact if Vickers is an android or not is very inconsequential to the overall narrative, making it more of a mystery for hardcore fans to speculate on, considering her fate in the film. And then we also have Elizabeth Shaw, who comes off as a discount Ripley for majority of the film, but shows great signs of resourcefulness and is a very interesting character as somebody who's looking for our creator, but at the same time has incredible faith in her religion. Then we have Guy Pearce's unrecognizable performance as Peter Whalen, whose reveal towards the ends of the film is a little anticlimactic, as it's very abrupt and odd, rather than mind-blowing as the filmmakers wanted it to be. I believe the reason for this film's shortcomings has a lot to do with Damon Lindelof's writing, where he asks so many questions, when he gives you a single answer, it leads to even more questions, leaving the audience unfulfilled with this experience, similar to what we saw on a much lesser extent in The Force Awakens.
Where'd you get that?
A good question. For another time.
This type of writing lends itself very well to television, where Lindelof clearly had his most success with the TV series Lost, where he had hours upon hours to answer the questions presented.
It's been 6 days, and we're all still waiting for someone to come. But what if they don't? We need to start figuring things out. We need to figure out how we're going to survive here.
This film is definitely a thinking man's alien movie with interesting visuals and inventive creature designs, yet, no pun intended, is very alien from the franchise, as the closest thing we get to a xenomorph is in the very last scene, and it brings more questions than answers once again. Overall, this film has a lot of interesting ideas and themes, but fails to pay off most of these elements that may be answered in Alien Covenant. However, since I haven't seen that film yet, for now, for me, Prometheus is just a good movie. So those are my thoughts on Prometheus. Do you agree, disagree? Let me know down in the comments below. And be sure to click right here to see my latest series review on The Prestige, and click over here to see my review of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, and a podcast that I did with my good friend John Maffio on his channel, Mothman Jones. And be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and check out my social media links down in the description below. Until next time, don't forget to watch some movies.